Welcome to this week's episode of Accelerate You, where we hope to inspire and motivate small business owners and entrepreneurs while providing them with low-cost resources and oftentimes free. I am Dr. Gina Messer-Node, and I'm the director of the Eastern North Carolina Center for Business and Entrepreneurship here in the beautiful North Carolina Wesleyan University campus. And today we have Dr. Angie Arrington in our studio, and she is with Evolve Consulting. And Dr. Arrington is going to give us all kinds of tips and tricks to make us more accelerated small business owners and entrepreneurs. So welcome, Dr. Angie.
Thank you, Dr. Gina. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, everyone in our audience may not know who you are, so will you take a minute and tell us exactly who you are and what you do over at Evolve Consulting?
Absolutely. I am, first of all, a family person. I'm also a compassionate community leader and advocate. As a business owner, Evolve Consulting is a management consulting firm. Our mission is to help leaders improve performance by leveraging employee development, employee engagement through leadership skill building. And what that means is we offer 3 core services: consulting, training, and coaching.
When you say management consulting, I immediately think expensive. I'm expensive. And I'm a one-woman show, and I'm trying to get from Friday to Friday. Tell me how you're not expensive. Tell me why I would want to utilize you as a management consultant.
So when I think about cost and expense, we also have to think about supply and demand and need. And so this business is based on a need that I identified in corporate America, where there's a gap between the performance of the leader and the productivity of the employee or team. And so I believe in value proposition. And when you think about value proposition, whatever that thing is that we really want, we find a way to get it. And so I'm affordable in that for the people who see the need, they're willing to make that investment in their company and or in themselves, because we do work with organizations as well as solopreneurs and or individual leaders who want to improve themselves.
So you sound a lot like our last week's guest, Chris Lesby with Lesby Law, who talked about starting a plan and growing together. Mm-hmm. It sounds like with your 3-pronged approach, you also have a plan where you can work with the solo entrepreneur and grow with them.
Absolutely. So when I think about the services that I provide or we provide at Evolve, everything that we do is about learning. Evolve, the process of becoming, is why I named the company Evolve. And when you think about that, we all are becoming. And I want to put ellipses to that and go better, ... better. Better in terms of our leadership and better at the core, because we cannot separate the individual person from leadership and or their organization. So to me, leadership is everything. And the reason I say leadership is everything is because when we can be those leaders who can influence other people to help achieve a common goal, and when we can be the leader who can be humble enough to acknowledge that we don't know it all and that we all need to improve, then we all get to grow. So every encounter that I have or we have as an organization, we are also learning and growing while we're teaching, consulting, training, etc.
So what I'm hearing is that leadership starts at the top and works its way down, and that leader is going to just sort of resonate throughout the company.
Yes, and what I teach is, and you are a leader either by choice, meaning choosing to define your skills, improve your skills, or you are a leader by default. And by default, it may mean that you're not an effective leader and that you need to improve yourself, in which case you might not have the level of success that you desire.
Always room for improvement.
Always room for improvement.
So let's talk a little bit about training. In this post-pandemic world, we've heard a lot about, I can't find good help, I can't keep good help, where are they? Nobody wants to work. So let's say I'm fortunate enough to have employees. How do I possibly take the time to train? It's such a crazy world out there. A lot of folks just cannot take their folks off the line for that time. So how are you going to go at that? How are we going to train if I've got to pull them off the line?
Well, we definitely believe in adaptability and being agile and being flexible around schedules. So we have a couple of clients that I won't name. They are manufacturing clients and they have shifts. We train in the evenings. We are training a group from 5 to 9. We break them into smaller groups, or we may work with that organization, usually someone from HR, to decide who is it best to pull off the line or floor, if you will, for the training. What I would say to part one of your question about how do we make it a priority or how can we afford it, we cannot not make it a priority. And what's happening in the organizations who don't make training a priority, they're not as productive. So their return on their investment isn't what it could be. They may not be providing the level of customer service that they desire. They may be losing business.
So let's talk about retention and losing business, because I'm totally on board with you in terms of training and providing quality customer service. The companies that you're working with, what kind of retention are they having with their employees once they invest in these training dollars? Are you seeing more of a vested employee?
Absolutely. So we have several programs that we use. We have a 1-week coaching package. We call that the intervention. We also have a 4-week program. We have an 8-week program and a 12-week program. Usually within the first 2 weeks, I'm hearing from the employee's leader the improvement that they're seeing. As it relates to turnover, we have yielded as much as a 15% reduction in turnover and or increase in retention. Training is everything. Most of the time, it's not an employee who's not willing to work. It's usually an employee that is uncertain because we don't often give them direction or clear direction, right? And we're so busy reacting, we're not pausing to be more proactive in how we manage our people and lead our people.
So that probably will lead me into my next question. I'm sure you've got you've worked with folks who say, my turnover is just so great, I can't afford to invest these dollars. It sounds like what you're saying is invest the dollars and decrease the turnover.
Absolutely. Invest the dollars, decrease the turnover, increase employee engagement / morale, increase customer service, increase your bottom line.
Which is what we all really care about, right?
Right.
We're all in this to make money.
Exactly.
Let's just be honest. Even our
honest.
nonprofits need to make money because they have a social enterprise they want to fund or promote or do something with it. So that's very important to make money. Absolutely. So. Project management, that's kind of a big old phrase that just kind of means getting the work done, but getting the work done in the proper manner, the proper steps. So as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize they've got to treat their business like a business.
Absolutely.
They've got to work it 8 to 5 or 8 to 9 p.m., whatever it is, they've got to work it. But I see a lot of entrepreneurs that come to see me that think it's going to be just a casual thing. Dispel that myth and talk to me about project management for the entrepreneur. What are 3 tips you would give our small business owner and entrepreneur out there listening today in terms of getting their projects done?
So first of all, I would say that plans are nothing, planning is everything. And that's a Ben Franklin quote that I learned years ago. When I think about 3 tips about project management, first of all, have a plan. Create a plan. When you're working with that client to onboard the client or the project that you're leading, you want to develop the scope of work, right? Whatever you proposed and agreed you were going to do, it now needs to be documented into a written plan with timelines. So I would say part 2 would be document the task, if you will. Part 2, create a timeline working backwards. So for example, most of our packages are at least 90 days. So we sit down as a team when we acquire or onboard that client, and we already have a system in place, an infrastructure in place that leads us from task 1 through task 10 or however many tasks there are, with timelines. Who's going to do that work? What efficiencies do we have? And we use them to create and identify lessons learned from inefficiencies so that you can be more productive. So have a plan, manage the plan using timelines, and of course I can't forget to talk about SMART goals, right?
Right.
We have to have a goal in mind, and whatever that goal is, to make sure we're achieving it. And when we get off course or the plan doesn't go the way we planned, go to plan B, C, D, E. Making sure you're staying in touch with the client. The last piece is the client will tell you, or whomever you're managing the project for, they will let you know when you're off the mark. You just have to be willing to be humble enough to ask and receive the constructive feedback.
And I think you hit it right there. And often as an entrepreneur, a one-woman or a one-man show, maybe we're not receiving that feedback, but we are, but we don't recognize it as feedback. And an example might be the phone's just not ringing. Mm-hmm. That may be the feedback, but you're not picking up on it. You also said two very important things. I'm a big fan of Ben Franklin as well. I do believe you got to have the plan. But two things that you said, you talked about contingency, B, C, D, E, F. Mm-hmm. In this post-pandemic world, not that I wasn't preaching it before COVID, but in this post-pandemic world, we really need to have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And experience is the best teacher. And so when we have these opportunities to learn from the mistakes we made, and I actually want to retract that word, from the decision that we made that didn't turn out the way we would have liked, right? It's not a mistake, it's a choice.
Right.
We had a chance to choose A or B. We chose B, it turned out the way it did, and let's say that was unfavorable. There is so much value in failing forward, by learning, and sometimes the school of hard knocks can be the most valuable lesson that one can learn. And then how do we apply that? How do we take that feedback? I recently acquired a contractor to design a pop-up banner. It was a solopreneur, young man someone had recommended to me who was getting started, etc. I was very clear about what I wanted. And after a couple of iterations, so he wanted to do everything electronically. I was good with that, except we got to a point where I felt like if we communicated verbally, I could have clarified some things, he would have understood, we could have gotten there. So it took us more iterations to the point where the young man emailed me and said, hey, how about I just give you a full refund and stop here? Because he didn't want to receive the feedback. He was not accustomed to working with clients who give him feedback. He expected to give me a design, I say yes, I take it, and that's it. And so I took advantage of that opportunity to teach him a lesson by saying, hey, let's talk about it. We've come too far on this project to stop. We're almost there. I just need you to hear me. And we don't want to hear because we think we have it right or we know it all. And the greatest lesson I've learned, one of them, is just when you think you have it all, you don't.
You also said something else, and I think that this is so very important. You don't want to use the word mistakes. You used the choice of the choice decision you made. But it's very important that we revisit those situations, right? But if I'm not really thick-skinned, like the young man you referenced, how do we get folks to revisit maybe the initiatives, the events, the client relationship that didn't go the way they had hoped it to go? How do I get a little bit thicker skin and revisit those?
I think taking a look at yourself and really finding out what's getting in the way and learning how to not take it personally. Because feedback is a gift. And the reason we call it constructive criticism is because it is a critique. And for the people who are willing to humble themselves, and I love this, I heard it recently, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking more about how you can help others. And so when you think about the humility in that vein and being willing to take the feedback to be better and to get it right, that's an open-mindedness that we find many people are closed to. And so we now have to ask people to go more within, to be more mindful about who we are, And in that authenticity and that mindfulness, acknowledging none of us are perfect. And I will tell you, Dr. Gina, one of the greatest challenges we see in the people business, because that's the business we're in, people and culture, is people don't have thick skin. People don't want to be told that what they're doing is not necessarily pleasing their targeted audience. Why wouldn't we? We are so open to feedback that we ask for it routinely as a part of all of our practices, whether we're consulting, training, or coaching. We want to know, and we're implementing that feedback, and that's why clients are calling us again and again and again.
Do you think that we were thicker skinned prior to COVID? Or you think we're on a general trend? What are your thoughts on resiliency?
So I do think that uncontrollables and pandemics, which is the first one I've lived through,
right?
That they ought to teach us something, and we ought to be more resilient. And I would say some people are. I do believe that the new now, post-pandemic, I find that people are definitely more sensitive and aware about what they're doing and saying, fundamentally. Whether we are trending toward that long term, I'm not so sure.
Okay.
I would say that it's to be seen.
Too early to tell. I'd have to agree with you on that one. When we talk about life in a post-pandemic world, which probably you are correct, most of us have not lived through any sort of episode like this, help me as a small business owner come up with a plan B, a plan C. What should I be thinking about in terms of a potential pivot?
I think we should be thinking about strategy and long-range planning and the experiences that we're having. So none of us expected COVID to happen. And what we saw was people doing just that, pivoting and shifting and changing and evolving. And how can we now take that experience and make it an opportunity for us to be more willing to be that agile? And out of the box thinking truly has happened. You look at restaurants who in the beginning shut down, and they started to realize, well, if we start curbside services, if we start partnering with delivery companies, if we start setting up drive-throughs and things that we weren't doing before, I'm talking sit-down restaurants that had to do things differently, we have the experience. So how can we utilize the experience that we've gone through to be reminded of that thing that got us through once before can get us through again? And having intentional discussions around scenario planning. And in the scenario planning, if a flood were to happen, what would we do? If this were to happen, what would we do? And just being thoughtful about it and intentional about including it in your plan. The last piece I want to add is for all businesses, we need a business plan. And there's so many small businesses who don't want to do the work. It is a blueprint. And if we keep checking in with it, we check in on our plan quarterly and biannually and annually, and we do a year-end review. And in those things, it's our opportunity to pivot, to shift, to add more of something that may be coming our way that we hadn't planned on in terms of target market. I do think it has to be very thoughtful, mindful, and intentional.
Okay, thoughtful, mindful, and intentional. I love that. Now, you said a dreaded word. You did. You know, anytime you approach an entrepreneur and say business plan, they immediately go to sleep on you. Mm-hmm. Now, I have some strong feelings about a business plan because the traditional business plan is a mammoth document. Mm-hmm. What I try to get my entrepreneurs to do is a plan, mm-hmm. But not necessarily what I would consider a traditional business plan.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about that?
I think we need not the mammoth plan because the trend is to evolve away from that. I'm on business 13. My first business plan was 50 pages. We don't do that anymore, right? At a minimum, though, we do need a good healthy document, 15 pages, 10, 15 pages, that details out some level of specificity. Because when I think plan, I don't just think investor. That's one reason we need a business plan. I don't just think lender, another reason we need a business plan. I think operating and growing my business sustainably and scalably. And so being able to check in with this plan, where am I? And or I targeted for my primary market this type of client. I'm getting this type of client, so do I flip-flop these, right? And so your blueprint, your guideline to managing and growing your business, it's a whole thing. Now, when you talk about business plan, Dr. Gina, the one thing that I'm promoting now, I'm involved with some of the launch programs. I'm program manager for Launch Nightdale.
Right.
And what we're teaching is the business canvas model. And taking that one-page document, and it's got 9 boxes, and narrowing your focus to these 9 boxes, but having some detail. So you submit the business canvas model to the investor, to the lender, to the people who you may be partnering or joint venturing with. And if you need to now share more, you have it.
So basically, it's that launch, that jumping page that you put as much information on, and then you can build from there.
Exactly.
So let's talk a minute about the launch programs. We have a Launch Rocky Mount. You are a graduate of Launch Raleigh, and you are involved with a Launch Nightdale.
Correct.
And I know that they're all very similar, and the Eastern North Carolina Center for Business and Entrepreneurship partners with Nash Community College, and we offer the launch program in downtown Rocky Mount, and we've been doing that, oh goodness gracious, since way before the pandemic.
Yes.
And we too had to pivot. We had to pivot from a nightly session to a virtual session, and we're now back to a nightly,
Yes.
one night a week session. So talk to us about your role with Launch.
Interesting, you raised Launch Rocky Mount. I actually was guest speaker for them on Tuesday night.
Very good, there you go.
And a very vibrant class of entrepreneurs. And I spoke to them. In fact, I raised business canvas model with them because actually their last class is next week. And so we did have a healthy conversation about that. But my role with Launch is I am a volunteer program manager. And I have a committee, a team that's working with me. And our focus is to plan and oversee the program, i.e. We've actually solicited some sponsors, generated some revenue. In fact, one unique thing that we did was we promoted on the front end of our class for applicants a business plan grant competition. And so we are actually awarding $2,500 to 4 small businesses who will be competing. Our competition is on May 11th in Nightdale. And the whole point of this is to, one, allow some of them to walk away with some capital. We know that access to capital is a huge need or gap for many small businesses, especially women and people of color. And so that was one thing that I was committed to creating and leaving as a legacy for Launch Nightdale. And so that is the role. Our role also is to help find mentors for the program, as well as other community partners. We've had guest speakers each week throughout our program, similar to Rocky Mount. And we are very excited to be graduating 16 businesses, 18 people, because we have 2 companies that have partnerships.
Wonderful, wonderful. There is not necessarily a launch in every community, but I strongly encourage you to check and see if there's one in yours, and if they're not, you're certainly welcome to join ours in Rocky Mount. Dr. Angie, it's been a pleasure today. I've enjoyed having you in the studio. Thank you so much. Tell our viewers how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. You can find me on social media at Evolve Consulting LLC. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And our website is evolveconsultingllc.com. And we would love to hear from you. Evolve Consulting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.